Climate Lobby. They're an organization working in Houston, really, and also nationally, to get a carbon tax and other legislation passed, and really trying to push politicians to um, do what is necessary to handle the climate crisis. Yeah, they're doing a lot of really great work. And so I'm really, really glad and really grateful they're able to come here today and talk about what they're doing and how we as Rice students can get involved. And that I'll pass on to them.
Well, thank you very much, Eunice, and to Gargi as well, and to the Rice Climate Alliance for inviting us. We are very happy to be here and to hopefully begin a long-term relationship with Rice University. We're just going to introduce ourselves real quick, and then we'll kind of jump into the work that we do. So I'm John, and I've been with Citizens Climate Lobby for 2.5 years. I'm a high school teacher in Houston ISD. And so I also have 2 little kids, and I'm around young people all the time. And it's hard to not become passionate and scared about the direction that we're going as a planet. And so I'm thrilled to be with Citizens Climate Lobby because of how active they are towards building a livable future.
Hi, this is Joe Garfunkel. I'm the Houston CCL chapter leader. And in addition to being chapter leader, I'm also leading our media team, which I'm going to talk about further down in the slide deck. In my full-time day job, I'm a project manager for Hewlett Packard Enterprise, which is a lot of fun. And I have a son who's married, and I have a 1-year-old granddaughter now. So that's why I'm involved. I got involved when my granddaughter was born.
Hi, I'm Courtney Hall. I'm a conservation specialist, background in ecology. So I work outdoors and found CCL to be a great avenue for me to learn more about impacts of climate and what we can do as members of our community, and really see the benefits of working together on this crisis.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Hackett. I'm a chemical engineer, and I got involved with CCL a couple years ago. I currently run the grassroots lever, and I'll be talking about that later on in this slide as well. Definitely a great organization, and hopefully we make some good bonds here tonight with you guys.
Hello, I'm Hans Van Brakel. I've been with CCL about 2 years. And I'm the congressional liaison for District Number 2, which is Dan Crenshaw, who I'm sure you've heard of. I worked for ExxonMobil for about 39 years. I retired a couple of years ago, so I've kind of seen both sides of the street here. But like Joe, I also have a 1-year-old granddaughter, and that's a powerful motivator to try to do something constructive.
And Judith, I apologize, we somehow left you off here, but please introduce yourself.
Judith Hyatt. I'm a retired librarian. I worked for the city for a long time. And I got involved with Citizens Climate Lobby because I was working on earth care things in my church. And I just wanted to learn more about the climate, and this was a great place to do it and to also get involved.
All right, so as we go through this presentation this evening, think about your why. So why we've just talked about why we're here. Think about why you chose to spend your evening with us and why you care about climate change and its impacts. To give some perspective across the world, the country, the state, impacts of climate change are felt. More importantly, they're felt by each one of us. Financially, like home insurance and real estate, that we feel the impacts of climate change, the products that we buy, like our agriculture, food that we consume, and the GDP is impacted as well. We also feel the impacts in the jobs that we might have access to in the future. So you rising students are going to enter the workforce, and the impacts of climate could impact the types of jobs y'all have access to. And it impacts our physical health, like working outside, the chance of diseases, and it also impacts our mental health. Every hurricane season takes a toll on me. Last week was a pretty mental, exhausting toll. And so just take a moment and identify what aspects of your lives are impacted or could be impacted by climate change. So sometimes it's figures that we see. So on the next slide, there's Galveston Island today. I actually went to school in Galveston and have been all across the island. And to think that at the end of the century, it's not going to be an island is very just intense to think about, but it's also possible to fix this. And so throughout the course of the presentation, you'll hear our solution, which is a piece to solve this climate crisis. And so I'd like to address next what happened last week, Winter Storm Uri. So there have been similar freeze events. 1989 freeze event was broken by the 2011 winter storm, which that record was then broken by last week's storm. So while this week's winter storm might not be unusual for winter, climate change does make weather events more intense, and research goes into these extreme events to understand how climate change may have influenced the event. To note, there is indication that a rapidly warming Arctic could slow down the jet stream that then shifts and allows cold air to push further south. But these storms, these past storms, they occur, and the mitigation that we might expect, they are demanded, but they're not implemented. But maybe as these events keep happening, we'll see that implementation. So our natural gas pipelines and power plants froze. They were not winterized. Some of the wind turbines were also not winterized because people didn't want to put the money into it. But if you notice in the news that the wind turbines freezing was like the sensational headline. When you can see that the demand for energy, whenever it depleted it was a host of all of our energy resources. So this storm and the ones that predate it are a good example of repeated weather events and their extraordinary consequences that are noticed and make the news, but action, well, like I said, that's to be determined. So again, to think about your why. One of our speakers, and to plug her, she'll be at an event that I think we'll plug later in this presentation. It's Catherine Hayhoe, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe. She's a climate scientist out of Texas Tech University. And she asked this question, and you can type in your answer. And so maybe one of your whys is here. And the biggest why is because we're human and we want to solve this crisis. So thank you again for joining us. And as my fellow volunteers share what CCL does, we hope that you get passion from what we do and other steps you can take.
Okay, so I am going to talk about the main legislation that Citizens Climate Lobby advocates for, which is the Bipartisan Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And this bill was introduced in the last legislative session and immediately racked up, massive support in the form of 86 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives from all over the country. I've got two names highlighted here that I want to point out. And the first is in the far left column, Representative Rooney from Florida, and he is a Republican. And yes, our bill has been bipartisan every time that it's been introduced in either the House or the Senate. And we do have appeal to both Republicans and Democrats. The other name I want to highlight here is Veronica Escobar, who's a Democrat who represents the El Paso area. She is the only Texan representative who has endorsed this legislation. And that's one of the reasons why we all work so hard and love to meet with people like you guys to try to educate the public and to build support around this idea of carbon fee and dividend legislation here in our state so we can get some more representatives to sign on to it. I'm going to go over some of the basics of how carbon fee and dividend legislation works. So I'm going to focus on the two big parts. The first step is that a fee will be placed on fossil fuels as close to the point of extraction as possible. And for some, that's at their first point of sale. The dirtier the fossil fuel source, the more they will pay because this is charged by ton of carbon dioxide that's emitted. $15 a ton is where it's set the first year, and it goes up $10 a ton after that. So it increasingly becomes more expensive to use fossil fuels. The other key part of this is that the money that is raised from this fee on fossil fuels gets returned to every American in the form of a monthly dividend check. So every month, Americans would get a check from the government based off of the fees raised from these fossil fuels. And that's important because once you put a fee on fossil fuels, it's going to make the price of a lot of goods go up. And so by returning that money back to the American people, it protects us, especially low and middle income families, from these higher prices that we'll see on fossil fuel intensive products. And I'm going to talk more about that here in a second. There are two other components to carbon dividend legislation, the Energy Innovation Act being the main one here, the border adjustment and a regulatory pause. I'm not going to talk about those just for the sake of time today, but if you have a question about them, put them in the chat and we're happy to explain it. The first thing is a price on carbon effective? And so if we do nothing to address our greenhouse gas emissions, that's where we'll be at 2050 with a 1% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. That would be awful for the United States. With carbon pricing, with a carbon fee, that's where we would be at 2050. We would see a 90% reduction according to outside analyses that Citizens Climate Lobby has commissioned. And one of the reasons why I really like carbon dividend legislation is that you see an immediate reduction in CO2 emissions. In 12 years, you see a 40% reduction. If you compare that to massive infrastructure plans, you wouldn't see anything in the first 12 years because it would all be being built. And I love the immediacy of the Energy Innovation Act. If you compare this to where we need to be, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from the United Nations says that we need to keep our warming below 2 degrees Celsius, ideally below 1.5. Our bill would meet that 2-degree threshold, and we get pretty close to the 1.5. Like Court said, this is one component of a climate solution, but it's a massively effective one at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Like I said, the money from that carbon fee goes to American households in the form of a dividend. And over time, that dividend gets pretty big because the carbon fee grows every year. And by year 10, a family of 4 would see a total dividend over the course of a year of over $4,000. 2/3 of Americans will actually make more money from the dividend than they're going to pay in more expensive goods from the carbon fee. They're actually going to come out ahead and make a little money off of this. And 90% of low-income Americans are going to come out ahead. And so we love that this is good for low and middle class Americans because we don't want them to be hurt by any climate change policy that we implement. Court talked about our health. We lose 114,000 people estimated every year to air pollution because of our poor air quality. And we estimate that our bill will save 300,000 lives over the course of a decade. Here in Houston, we have 100,000 kids with asthma. And it would be so wonderful and such an improvement in their lives if we could clean up their air quality now. This bill is also a massive job creator and boost for our economy. We currently lose about $240 billion a year in environmental and health harms from fossil fuels, and our bill would help reduce that. In addition, we would spur massive innovation in green tech, carbon capture, different technologies to keep energy affordable, and those would create tons and tons of jobs. Those dividends that would be paid to every American, they're going to spend that money, and that's going to create jobs in totally different sectors. So this is an economic boost regardless of what economist you ask. We have thousands of economists who have endorsed carbon dividend legislation. And lastly, this is bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans both like this bill. Republicans like it because it's revenue neutral, doesn't grow the size of government. It's market-based. Once polluters pay for the true cost of their product, we let the market decide what product is the best. And this bill has the support of oil and gas companies like ExxonMobil and BP, which is surprising, but it also has the support of the Environmental Defense Fund and the World Wildlife Federation. Democrats like Adam Schiff and Republicans like former Secretary of State and a huge figure on Rice's campus, James Baker. And we think that's important because we want to create a climate policy that is long-standing and resilient. We don't want a climate policy that one president puts into place and the next one takes out, like what we saw with the Paris Climate Accords. We want to create something like Social Security that both parties agree with and that can last a long time so that we can actually see this thing through. If you have questions about the bill, please put them in the chat and we'll have a Q&A afterwards. But first, we're going to talk some about how our Houston chapter is organized.
Hi, so this is Joe again. I'll talk about our Houston chapter. And this is not just the Houston chapter. This is how all CCL chapters nationwide are organized. And CCL is also an international organization with chapters in other countries. So on the left there in the column, you can see we have what we call 5 levers of political will. The folks who created CCL, many years ago, figured out what it takes to try to persuade people to get climate change actually solved. And so right at the top there, you can see I have a little spear there. I'll call it the tip of the spear. That's kind of like military jargon, but it's where, the rubber meets the road, lobbying. This is where everything happens. We make change, or we will be able to make change by talking to our representatives. That means members of Congress and senators here in the Houston metro area and Texas statewide. Other chapters talk to their representatives. We lobby, we talk to them, we explain why this bill needs to be passed to help solve climate change. The other bullets here, the other levers are equally as important, but the other levers are there to support the lobbying effort, which is the tip of the spear. Grasstops outreach, which John leads. We need to speak to business leaders, faith leaders, government leaders to get their endorsements. And when we're able to get them to sign on to provide endorsements to support this bill, that helps our lobbying effort, and it helps convince our representatives that this is something solid that has large support that needs to be passed. Media relations, which is the lever that I lead, we interact with the media to communicate our messages and to explain what we're doing and why this has to be done. Grassroots outreach, which Jimmy Hackett leads. This is where we gain support from regular citizens and chapter development that again helps support our overall members, building cohesiveness and making us work together as a team. Go on to the next slide. Here's the media relations slide, and in media we have the 5 whys. So who does media for CCL? Well, I put this slide together. I thought that students in journalism, English, and liberal arts are natural candidates. You like to write typically, you like to read, And these are the folks that most likely will be interested in working with the media to help us out. If you have an interest in climate change, you can research, you have an awareness of current media topics, you have some creativity and an interest in politics, then you're, you're the ones that could help us. So what do we do? Well, we try to interact with all types of media. That includes print, radio, TV, and social media. Some of the things we do, we can distribute editorial packets to the media. We submit letters to the editor and op-eds to different media outlets. We request media outlets to write editorials on climate change to help support and endorse what we're doing. We can request interviews with the media to discuss climate change. We can submit press release documents for to discuss events that are happening. And where do we do this? Well, we are the CCL-Houston chapter. So this spans the entire Houston metro area and Houston suburbs. Next slide. When do we do this? Well, we're all volunteers. We don't get paid for this work. We have other commitments in our personal lives, and we do this during our spare time throughout the year. Why do we do it? Well, you heard from us. We all have a reason why. We want to help solve climate change, right? For our children, our grandchildren, spouses, relatives, friends. Climate change is real, it's happening, and it's an existential threat to our personal lives. So if you're interested in media, you can check us out. I have a lot of links here, and we'll distribute the slide deck so everyone can click on those links. We have some really easy, quick 2-minute videos, who we are, the 2-minute video to just explain more about carbon dividends. We have a sample of our editorial packet we put together just in January. We have a couple of op-eds that were published in the Chronicle. You can see what we're writing and what we're doing there. We have an example of a letter to the editor published earlier last year. We have that on our WordPress account, and it was actually published in the Chronicle. And you can follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Next slide.
Okay, this is back to me. I do lead our Grass Tops outreach team. I stole Joe's kind of who and what and the W's, but who are we? We're just average, everyday people. And it's really crazy that we end up meeting with some very powerful people. And it's exhilarating and nerve-wracking, but we do it because we know that it needs to be done, and also because it's kind of fun. So we reach out to businesses, prominent individuals, elected officials, churches, really anybody who we think carries some weight and who can help us kind of further our cause. We're currently working on 3 big projects: the Texas Resolution Project that Judith will speak about. We're reaching out to the Greater Houston Partnership, which is kind of like the Chamber of Commerce here in Houston, and Rice University. We would love to reach out to members of the staff at Rice, donors, prominent students on campus. We were very interested in that. And, just to kind of show you guys who takes place in these lobbying meetings, that's a picture of me meeting with a staffer for my state senator, Carol Alvarado. And all those other people are high school students. Those are all my students. And so if you guys get involved in Citizens Climate Lobby, we will very quickly throw you into a meeting so that you can kind of jump right in and get involved in meeting with your elected officials. And we meet once a month to kind of strategize.
So the biggest project that the Grass Tops team is working on right now is the project to pass the Texas House Concurrent Resolution 22, or HCR 22. It was introduced into the Texas House of Representatives by Rafael Anchia, who's a West Dallas representative, and by Ann Johnson, who is the Texas House member who represents Rice University. We've had a discussion with 7 Houston area representatives from both parties, including the staff of Senators John Whitmire and Joan Huffman, in hopes of getting the resolution introduced into the Texas Senate. The official description of the resolution is expressing support for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Texas while expanding and diversifying the economy. The resolution is short. It requires no funding from the legislature, and its emphasis is on the economy, which is a very effective emphasis for a red state. So to sort of paraphrase the resolution, it acknowledges the long-term effects of carbon emissions. on the population and the economy. It also says that efforts to mitigate the risks of climate change will strengthen the Texas economy and its global competitiveness. And it encourages the creation and support of economically viable solutions, both public and private. Passing the resolution is a worthy cause, but a difficult one in the red state. And we are encouraged that a similar resolution succeeded in Utah, another red state. And the reason for the success in Utah is because a group of young voters lobbied the legislature for passage. So we would love to work with Rice students to build a statewide groundswell to get this resolution passed. It would serve as an endorsement for the federal legislation that the Citizens Climate Lobby has as its primary goal. Okay.
All right, that brings us to grassroots. I did not get the who, what, when, but I won't take it personally. No. I run the grassroots lever, and so we're mostly focused on any kind of outreach that's targeting the general public. Obviously, that's really important for something like CCL, because one of the ways that we convince people in Congress to take action on bills like the bill that CCL supports is by showing that the bill is popular in their district. And one way that we do that is with a monthly calling campaign. And it's been a major focus after COVID with lockdowns of trying to get more support and more encouragement for people to do the monthly calling campaign. Basically, this is an attempt by CCL to get their members and other people to call Congress once a month and request that they support HR 763. And it's really very easy to do. And one of the things we do in grassroots is try to spread awareness about this campaign, and also to keep participation within the chapter with this campaign high as well. And I'm putting some links here, but I'll actually be sending all these out in the breakout session, and then can send this to anybody else afterwards as well. Links for signing up, really easy to do. And John, if you want to go to the next slide. The other thing that we had that's also part of our popular outreach and trying to show people in Congress support within their districts is with our virtual postcard project. And so the virtual postcard project allows people to send a picture of themselves and a small paragraph to people in Congress, explaining to them why they care about HR 763. One of the grassroots project right now is to get these postcards collected. We'll be talking about this more in our breakout session as well. But the nice thing about both of these projects is that anybody can participate, even people who are not CCL members. And so it's a great opportunity for people to use this group, this CCL, and to branch out to other groups that they may be a part of and show support for the bill as well. And then again, yeah, perfect. And so this is an example of what one of those postcards looks like. Actually, we have a nice template from CCL for doing this. So all we really need is a picture, the person's address, hopefully also their voting district, and then a short paragraph showing why they support the bill. These can be assembled, and they can also assemble them on their own. They can download the template offline or online rather, and but this nice looking postcard that we'll assemble and send out to people in Congress when we do our lobby meetings coming up in March. And then lastly, of course, we are talking to Rice University, Go Owls. And of course, that means on-campus outreach. And so we're always looking for groups to collaborate with to talk about this bill and about climate change. So if anybody has any ideas for collaboration with other groups on campus, definitely reach out to us. And in particular, grassroots, we're always looking to build collaboration.
I'm going to skip chapter development, but if you join CCL, they will reach out to you. They help kind of onboard new members.
So last but not least is lobbying. And since lobbying is part of our name, you would think it's pretty important, and it is. And Joe has already touched on this, how this is, really where the rubber hits the road and what we're all about at the end of the day is about lobbying Congress to support carbon fee and dividend legislation. That's really the core activity of what we do in Citizens Climate Lobby. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that and kind of how we're organized. We have several, what I would call formal meetings, formal plan meetings per year with members of Congress, what we call lobby days, to either the member of Congress, him or herself, or their office. And I think we're planning on having 4 of those this year if all goes according to plan. And actually, we're in the midst of planning an upcoming meeting right now in just several weeks from now with Dan Crenshaw. And as I said in the introduction, I am the liaison for Dan Crenshaw. And you might ask, well, what does a liaison do? Well, each member of Congress has a liaison appointed by Citizens Climate Lobby. But their job is not to do the lobbying. Their job is simply to coordinate communications, set up meetings, and kind of organize, herd the cats to make sure we have a good orderly meeting. Actually, any constituent can be active in lobbying and can join our lobbying activities. Now, some districts have a standing team. I have a standing team that helps me with the lobbying effort for Dan Crenshaw. We meet fairly regularly. Joe's on that team, among others. And I think that's a pretty effective team. Other liaisons are, they have maybe ad hoc teams that they put together in preparation for a meeting. So different people do it different ways. But I guess my message for you is, if this sounds like anything you're interested in, and maybe you want to have your photo taken with Dan Crenshaw like I did, if that's your thing, feel free to reach out and try to join our lobbying activities. And I do also want to close with, lobbying goes beyond just having a actual meeting. Actually, all the meetings these days have been Zoom meetings. Hopefully we'll get to the point before too long where we can have in-person meetings again. But there are other opportunities for lobbying Congress. Jimmy talked about the monthly call-in campaign. That's a great way to lobby your member of Congress by, just pick up the telephone and call him. And also writing a letter. He mentioned the postcards as well. Any kind of written communication expressing your support for carbon fee and dividend would be very helpful. So I hope with everything you've heard tonight, that maybe it'll kindle some interest and maybe you'll want to get involved in our lobbying activities. And if you do, please reach out to us. We'll help you out.
So at this point, we may not take the full 10 minutes, but we'd love to answer any questions that you guys have about CCL, climate change, the work that we do. And I see one in the chat right now that I can answer. Has CCL worked at all with the Baker Institute to have a discussion or webinar or something on one of these bills? We have had limited interaction with the Baker Institute. We met with former Harris County Judge Ed Emmett in October, I believe, and he is a new employee at the Baker Institute. James Baker has put forward a similar plan to what Citizens Climate Lobby does. The only thing that's really different is the rate at which the carbon fee is assessed. But we would love to, through a collaboration with Rice University, to meet with the Baker Institute and try to develop a closer relationship than what we have now.
There's one more in the chat window, John.
Oh, you touched on this briefly, but could you talk a bit more about what power resources Rice students have that would be important for passing these sorts of climate policies? Young people have immense power when it comes to climate policy. Elected officials, I don't know what it is, but elected officials love to hear from high school and college students. And so in terms of what you could do, we are constantly meeting with state reps and state senators to work for the resolution in the Texas legislature that Judith mentioned. And you guys could get involved with that. And we'll touch on that in our breakout session. You could become members of Hans's lobbying team. Rice University is in Dan Crenshaw's district, but whatever district you're in, you could be involved with lobbying. And, like Jimmy said, just making those monthly calls makes a huge difference. So it's really up to you how much time you want to spend into getting involved with lobbying. And as much as you want to spend, we will find a place for you.
And John, if I could just add on to that real quick too, for anybody who's thinking about, or obviously you guys are in college, that would be a good thing to mention in your virtual postcard. Mention that you're in college, mention why you care, because like what John is saying, they do want to hear from young people, and obviously that's a powerful voice, and so we want to get that voice expressing itself through our channels.
Joe runs our social media pages, and I know Joe would love help with those as well. Does CCL have any plans to work with or present with any of the environmental law student organization in Houston's 3 law schools? We do not currently, but we would like to. And Nikki, if you could help us organize that, we would love to. This is the first presentation that we've done to a university here in Houston, so I hope we're doing okay. And I think that the University of Houston might be next for us. A student has reached out to us, but we would love to present to environmental law student organizations. And I think that here in a second, I'm going to put a survey in the chat, a Google form for you guys, so that, well, we'll do it in the breakouts. I'll put the link in there now, so that you can tell us what are you interested, how are you interested in becoming involved in Citizens Climate Lobby.
John, I'd like to add one more item to this previous question about presentations. This is actually a really good question. There are other chapters nationwide, other CCL chapters that have ongoing programs where they are able to present about climate change in general and specifically about what CCL does. And they're able to prevent in college classrooms, classes that are in regard to climate change, I guess environmental science or anything similar. There are also chapters that have presented similar classes in high school science classes. Once schools are aware that we can do these types of presentations, a lot of people ask for them, and they're pretty effective, pretty useful. Many people still don't know what climate change is. They don't understand what causes climate change, and they don't understand what the impacts are. And this is all about providing education in that regard.
So Gargi and Eunice, is it breakout session time?
Yeah, it certainly is. So I'm going to go ahead and open breakout rooms for 4 of the levers that they talked about today. So there's one for grassroots outreach, one for grass tops outreach, one for media and social media, and one for national lobbying. So depending on what you guys are interested in, there will be someone from CCL in each of those rooms that you can talk to and ask more questions about based on how you want to get involved. So I'm going to go ahead and open those rooms, and you can self-select which room.
And you guys will have 2 options. So you can make 2 choices. We're going to do 2 10-minute sessions here. And I just put a survey in there where if you find a lever that speaks to you, please fill that out and we'll be in touch.
Okay, and the breakout room should be open. So if the CCL volunteers could also join their specific ones, that would be great too.
How do we join?
There should be a little breakout rooms tab at the bottom that allows you to click.
Oh, I do see the breakout rooms tab.
Okay.
Okay, well, you just didn't get the message, but how's it been going?
It's been good. I was worried people wouldn't come, so.
Oh, wait, how's the recording?
Oh, shoot.